All right, we're installing a Warn VRX 4.5 winch on my Honda Pioneer 700, and I'm using the Warn mount kit instead of the KFI one piece that I see others using. And I just did that because it was easier to order and get here quickly for me this week as opposed to next. I'm trying to think, see which one. Yeah, there it is. So here's the mounting kit box so that you know what I'm using. So, and then I'm on my Honda Pioneer 700. The instructions so far are pretty straightforward, and they have nice diagrams and pretty clear instructions. So I'll show you what that looks like. So this is all sitting in here like this. I haven't put this bottom roller piece on yet, but I put the mounting plate on. So you can see, first thing they did is they had me take out these two bolts and replace them with theirs. So I just dropped those in on each side, on that side as well, there. And they're just longer bolts because you're going to mount this plate on the bottom side of those two bars there. I set it on top and I thought, oh shoot, the holes, it's not wide enough, the holes don't reach. And then I went back and looked at the instructions like we should do at the start, and it goes on the bottom, so, and then it fits just fine. So you lift this plate up into place, and on these two you just quickly screw a bolt on, and then I just worked my way back and forth and got those bolts up and into place. I did not tighten them here. I left them just on but loose so that I could take these two plates then on top and drop the 4 bolts down through, and they bolt onto the existing bar on this bumper guard, this brush guard. So they're clamping down as they bolt onto the plate that you've lifted up into the bottom here. And you just do that on the same side, on the other side as well. So, and once I had all those through, I just kind of worked my way around on the bolts and tightened her down really good. I put the washers on top on each of all, let's see, there's the 2 here, the 4 here, and then same on the other side. I put them on top because the bolt is not flanged, but the bottom bolts that came with the kit, they are flanged, so I did not put the washers there. So and there's just a little bit of bolt sticking through, so you could probably throw a lock washer on the bottom if you wanted to. So that's kind of step 1, and now we're supposed to start assembling, according to the instructions, the roller bar. I didn't see any videos online, at least I couldn't find any, to see if guys mounted this onto the plate first, and I might end up thinking that would be an easier route to go, but I'm just following the instructions as given, just so, since this is the first time I've done one on this Pioneer. So anyway, this is step 2, and I'll show that after I put it together. All right, so assembling this guy, you can see that just set it up so the contours are just the same. So I have it just sitting down, and then you attach this to the face using the 2 round top bolts that they have in the kit, with a lock nut on the back. It's got the plastic inside, so it locks itself. Pretty simple. And now we're going to mount that. I think the next step is to mount that up and in, just like that. So, all right, so that was easy to mount on. Just the 3 bolts there, and then they have lock nuts on the back with the plastic lining, so there's no washers involved. And you just put them on. I think they were all 15 millimeter. I can't remember what these were. Seems like they were 12 millimeter. So, all right, so next step is the winch. All right, a few things with the winch before I install. It says it's going to, the feeder up because it's gonna top mount into the plate with these 4 holes. I measured the distance from the holes because there's actually 8 holes in the top of that plate, and I just wanted to make sure I knew in advance. It's going to be the outside holes, so the inside holes will not be used. And it's going to slip in here from the side and go up. I'm going to actually have my boys help me because this thing weighs a ton. Hold it into place, and then we'll just run the cable out through there, be ready to go. It seems a little odd. Oh, these are the 4 bolts. They call a lot of the bolts in here M8 bolts, but in the listing of the parts, you can see there's multiple M8 sets of bolts, but they're all different sizes. So I just laid them out cleanly here, and it was just very intuitive reading the instructions, the length of bolt, and describing the flanges and the locks and stuff, and just had all the washers, so that went really smooth. These 4 bolts seem kind of small. They're the smallest of the bolts in the whole set, but this is what's going to hold that thing on, and it seems kind of strange, but that's the way it goes. And then we're going to use these lock washers in on the top, and they just come down through the plate right into, we're going to go down through the plate and pin this up against it inside. It's kind of weird. They threw their sticker on upside down for this mounting application, which I think is strange, unless I'm not understanding, but I don't see any other way to do it. So anyway, so I think this is going to face to the passenger side based on their instructions. Here we go. All right, we got it. It's mounted in there. We used the 4 bolts there on top that I showed you with the lock washer on top. They went down through the top plate, and then the winch is mounted against the bottom of the plate. It was kind of tricky getting it through here, but it fit just with some finagling, and it set up just right. And this comes over the top. Make sure you're spooling over the top. It was a little tricky getting it to slide through and get it to here, but I finally got it, and then I just assembled this guy that comes with it as well. So the winch is installed. That was not as hard as I thought it would be, but the tricky part now is all the wiring, and I've never done that before, so we'll see how this goes. See if I can do it myself without calling someone for help. But that'll be the next step. All right, the wiring is done. Everything I'm about to show you, all the wiring came with the Warn VRX 4.5 kit. I had never wired a Honda Pioneer 700 or any UTV or ATV for that matter. I've been working on my Honda Pioneer 700 2021. So I was a kind of a newbie to this. I've done wiring in the house, including a full basement, just reading diagrams, watching videos, kind of common sense stuff. So I have that knowledge background, but hopefully this is helpful to you. When you open your kit, you have 4 big thick wires, a yellow and blue and a red and black, and that's where I started. So I took the yellow and blue and I came down here to the side of my winch, and there is a yellow plastic washer and a blue plastic washer. I slipped the rubber boot that came onto the power cable, and then just put a nut on the outside and cinched it to the nut on the inside. I added an extra nut on the outside for that. And then I ran them up through here on the inside of the framing and zip tied them to protect it from anything flying up here. And I just came straight up the framing, as you can see. And because I'm gonna come back in here probably next summer, winter's just starting here in Wyoming, I'm probably gonna put a heater in here. And so I wanted everything just zip tied in here, convenient for me for the next 8 months, but I might be able to put the heater in here with everything the way it is now, but I can move things around fairly easily. So I just came straight across the frame. I decided to mount the solenoid, or the controller, I've seen it called both, just with the bolts that came with it on this plastic so that it was up and out of the way. I've seen guys mount them down below, down in there on either side. I didn't like that, even though it's supposed to be, it can get wet. I didn't want it to get wet if possible, so I put it right up in here out of the way and dry under the hood. Each of the 4 posts on top were color coded. Again, this is the one that came with the Warn Winch, the VRX 4.5. So I just put my 2 wires right up on the posts that came with it. Again, before I did that, I slipped the rubber boot on and then worked it over. The rubber boot was kind of tricky to get on. I mean, it only took a few seconds, but it was more difficult than I thought. And then pulling it over was a little bit of a chore, but not too bad. I then took the red and black wires, and you'll see a bunch of wires in here, and by the time I'm done explaining, you'll be like, oh, that all makes sense. Don't get confused by that net of wires in there. It's not as confusing as it looks. The red and black are the longer main 4 cables, and obviously these are going to go to your battery as long as it's still under your seat and you haven't moved it somewhere else. So I followed other wiring again. I just went down and followed the frame post here along with this existing wiring tubing, and I just zip tied it to that tubing inside of the posts so that, again, anything flying up doesn't hit it. And then there's a gap in your floorboard down there. You can see that. And so you have the protective plate on the bottom of the unit, and then maybe 4 or 5 inches of space between your inside floor, and you can just run through there. I actually fished the wires from this end down through and then pulled them up because it was a lot easier that way, and you'll see why here in a second. Winter is starting. Well, it started a little while ago, but it's really supposed to hit today here in Wyoming, so got the tarp on this to keep the snow out. So I just fished the wires down through here, and they hit the bottom, and then just pushed them, and then I reached back in from the other side there and pulled them up, and then I zip tied it to this existing wiring unit, and there was existing wiring going down, and it shouldn't be anywhere near heat. All the heat is back there in the engine, and it should be perfectly safe. This is how many others have done it that I've seen. And then I just popped here into the battery housing. I had watched a guy in the pro shop wire directly to this, and so I did the same. I don't know why, just because he did it and he was in a pro shop and wasn't a guy at his house. And everything worked fine when I was all done, except once I got my plow on, it would only lift it about 1 inch, and then the solenoid in here would rapid fire click. And I don't know why, because everything else was just perfectly right. So today I swapped and moved my cables off of this and directly to the battery, and now it just lifts the pile just fine. Full power, everything's fine. I don't know how that guy was making this work. I don't understand electronics well enough to know if he was doing something different. It didn't appear to be, but I went directly to the battery and everything's fine. So those are the 4 main cables, and then you have this unit here that mounts, well, I mounted mine in the glove box. Let me show you that unit. I had ordered an extra one thinking I needed one, but this all came with my plow kit. So this guy allows you to have a remote control switch, and it has 3 components coming off of it. Let me talk about where you want to mount this and how to do that, and then I'll talk about all the wiring coming off of it and what's in there. I'm going to set this here just so it's out of the way for us, so I can come back to it later and explain some things. most guys I've seen mount theirs in the glove box so that you can take this remote cable that plugs into it and just stick it in your glove box if you want to do that. So I went ahead and just drilled the main hole, and then I slipped all the wiring through the main hole and then just popped that unit in there. And then once it was snug in that main hole, I just drilled the bolt holes through the openings that are already there. And then I just cinched it all together with those nuts there in the back. And so that's it. That's the unit coming out of the glove box. Now, this unit has three basic components coming off of it. The first is a shorter strand of wires. And these are coiled up back here for me temporarily until you hook it up to a rocker switch, if you want to, or you can just coil that up and zip tie it back up in there and keep it out of the way. But I wanted this rocker switch in my panel, and so I'm going to eventually mount it right here. I was just going to throw it in there, but then I saw a video with a guy that had a custom panel. I think it's like crossroads3d.com or something like that, has some custom panels with cutouts and a slot for your phone, and so, or any device, GPS, whatever you're using. So I ordered that, and when it gets here, I'm gonna mount it all up there in the dash. But again, you can coil this short strand up and just leave it tucked back up in there and never use it if you don't want a rocker switch, or come back and do it later, at least for me. Then you have a longer strand of wires coming off, and those, most of this coil back up in here is that longer strand. I don't know why it's so long, but I just coiled it back up in here. If you have some tools, you could probably cut this all down and then remount your deals there. But off that longer strand with the Warn Winch kit, some kits look different as far as what the wiring they have, but with this Warn Winch kit, it had a black and a green, and those go on these two outside posts. And the wiring diagram that came with this kit is just very simplistic. It was helpful, and it was my main point of reference, but it wasn't the exact same wiring. There were a couple deviations, I don't know why, and so I had to kind of troubleshoot that way by looking at some videos and using some common sense. But it tells you where to put those on the posts. So those are the two strands, and then there's a third piece coming off that glove box unit, and that's there in the glove box. And again, I'm just sticking this here so it holds out of the way. This long red wire, and this is the wire that you tie into some type of power line that comes on with the ignition. And I don't understand wiring enough but to explain all that, but when you start your engine with this wiring setup that I've shown you, this red wire then allows the system to go, basically, to receive power. So the way I did that, I went down to the Honda Pro Shop nearby and asked them where the best place to do that is. And they said there's a 12-volt power unit right here in the dash, and just to unplug the back of that, which I did. The snow's starting to fall here, so I'm trying to hurry. Unplug the back of that, and I just squeezed that, and it came right out. And then expose I forgot I had taped this up. Expose the white and green wires and use the device that came with the kit to splice that. And I'm going to unwrap this so you can see it, because this is an important step where you don't have to cut any of the wires. So let me unwrap this and I'll show it to you. Okay, the snow's starting to fall, so I want to hurry here. But this little device that came with the kit, there's actually two of them that came with the kit. I only used the one. I had never used before, but what it is you don't have to cut any lines. I did cut this down shorter so I don't have a big coil back in here, this red line coming off the glove box. And you slip it in to this unit this little device to the end here. You don't have to expose any wire. It can be plastic coated still. I just cut the line short, that's it. I slid it in, and then off the top side, and I have another one here I can show you. So I slid the red piece in here on this hole and slid it to the end, which I just showed you. And then this side opens, and so I just push the wire down, the white wire down through. So it's popped in there, and the white wire and the red wire, there's no exposed wire. And then you clamp this down, and I use some pliers just to pinch it tight. And when it clamps down, it pushes that metal device down into the wires, and it creates a permanent power splice. And then I went and plugged it back up in here. Plugged it back in, and you're good to go. I'm gonna cover this up real quick. A bunch of snow gets in there. And that's it. It really works out pretty slick. One last deal here before the snow buries me. There's one brown wire that came with the kit, and it plugs into this center prong and wraps up, and it sits right over where the black wire connects, and that's all on the diagram. And that is it. That's the full layout for this simple winch install. Pretty slick. I liked it a lot, and it worked well. Now that I wanted to keep everything dry, I'm getting it wet with the snow. So I'll add one more piece here after I cover. All right, back here in the shop, I wanted to add this one piece at the end. These are all the parts I had left over from the electrical kit. There's a whole bunch of little baggies that come with it, and that's because I believe most of this, if not all of it's for like a handlebar install on your little rocker switch for an ATV. And I think that's why the wiring diagram was slightly different, is they had the diagram is for an ATV with that rocker switch that sits up on top of your handlebars, and so it's just slightly different. But they sent me a UTV panel switch, but then I don't think they go in and take out the extra bags of ATV parts. So, I mean, you just lay them all out, and it all makes sense as you put things together and follow the diagram. You're just gonna grab the nuts and lock washers and all that that you need. So no big deal there. And it's a really slick process, and I don't think anybody will have any trouble that follows the steps I just showed you. First time you're probably seeing me, so I probably don't look like what you thought. Anyway, enjoy the video. I hope it's helpful. And it was really kind of a slick install here in my shop, and didn't have too many troubles at all, other than that one little wiring directly to the battery. And I don't know why that was an issue. I'm going to ask somebody. So, good luck.